Good evening, everybody. Oh, now.
We can do what's right.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the December 8th Rotterdam Town Board meeting. Ms. Marco, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Christo,
Present.
Mr. Guidarelli,
Present.
Mrs. Villa Herrera,
Present.
Mr. Signor,
Present.
and Mr. Thompson's absent. Four present, one absent.
Mr. Mastriani, could you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Sorry again for the delay, folks. Some administrative glitches, but I think we're on our way. Okay. One of the resolutions for this evening is to regarding health insurance and benefits for our employees, and I'd like to give the floor to Gina Longo, Vice President Consultant, Benefits Consulting with USI Insurance Services. Gina, introduce yourself at the podium and
Thank you, Evan.
tell us what you got.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, what I'm going to do tonight is go through the renewal for 2022 and explain the increases. The benefits that I'm going to talk about tonight are the medical, the group Medicare, and the dental, excluding the night shift plan. The New York State Health Insurance Plan is a government-run plan, and they do not allow consultants like ourselves to work on that. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Gina Longo. I'm with USI Insurance, and we are the benefits consultant for the town of Rotterdam. Okay, so I'm going to start with the medical plans. You have two CDPHP medical plans. The reason for two is for one union has one plan, and all the rest have the other. The one plan is a 4.09% increase. The other is a 3.88% increase. And those are your CDPHP community rated plans. You also have 3 MVP plans that are community rated as well. One is 3.38. The other is 3.38, and the third is 3.38. I just want to quickly explain community rated. Community rated means that you pay the rates that is the book of business for the carrier. It's not experience rated. You could be experience rated based upon your size. And every year we request quotes from the other carriers for an experience rated quote. 6 years ago, the difference was the experience rated quote would have been a 22.4% increase. That has gradually been coming down, getting closer to the community rate. So it went from 22.4, 16.7, 14.2, 12.1, and last year it would have been 8.6. Unfortunately, for 2022, when we requested it, it bumped up a little bit to 11.9. And your overall increase, community rated, is 3.9. So basically what that is telling us is that your utilization is higher than the community rated pool. So we constantly analyze that every year to find the best, most competitive rates for the town. The other plan that you have is a Humana Medicare Advantage plan. That was a plan last year that replaced the MVP Medicare plan and the CDPHP Medicare plan. There was two very advantageous reasons to do that. One is it saved a considerable amount of money. And the second was it allowed people who retire that decide to go to Florida, Arizona to live, they can join that plan and they can live outside of Rotterdam when they retire. And it was very competitively priced. You also have 2 dental plans. Again, the reason for 2 is because of the union contract negotiations, which are different. That is a self-funded plan, and what that means is that you actually pay the claims. You pay an administrator to administer those claims. You pay Delta Dental. That utilization has been running very, very good. And as a result, there was not a need for an increase in dental. I do want to just point out one thing. Part of the reason for the utilization could be accredited to COVID. Some people have not gone to the dentist. They've been a little uncomfortable going to receive services. We do see that continuing a little bit more into 2022 as well. So based upon that, again, all of your benefits, excluding NYSHA, it's a 3.49% increase, or $85,909, or $86,000. That increase is the town's increase, partial, and then the employee's contribution. So I think that I try to be quick, concise, and to the point, and give a little bit of background for everybody. Does everybody have any questions?
Gina, I have a question, and I
Yes.
might be getting this wrong, but is it, if you're on a community rate and you go to experience rate, is it like you can't go back to that or something? At one time, wasn't there something like that?
They did say that, but we have gotten agreements with CDPHP that if you go back as a total replacement back to CDPHP, they will say yes.
But in general, there was at one point?
There was, yes.
Okay, so I just want to
No,
make
you're
sure.
100% right,
Yeah.
but based on our analysis over the, over the years, you're still,
Not as good as the community rate.
you're better off with the community rate for now. That, we analyze that every year and keep an eye on that, because if you do become experience rated, there's more things that we can do to help control those costs. So we would like to get to that point someday.
Gene, I'm sorry, the 85,000 approximate, that's the town's portion,
That's the
exclusive
town-
of the employee's portion.
No, that includes both.
Includes both, thank you, okay.
Includes both. Yep, includes. I don't have that breakdown with me.
That's fine, I just want to make sure it's both, not just one.
Yep.
Anybody else have questions for Gina? Thank you.
The only thing I just wanted to add is that we would recommend in February, meeting again, to start strategizing for savings for the following year. And I'd be glad to do that. I'd be glad to answer any questions from new members as well. I've given my cards as well, so thank you.
Thank you, Gina.
And Evan, thank you for calling me Ms. Longo. You made me feel very young, so thank you. It's my dyed hair that. Thank you. Good to see you all.
Thank you, happy holidays to you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes. At this point, Ms. Greenwood, if you'd like to come up and discuss the budget a little bit?
All right. I'm sure my explanation is probably going to engender a whole lot of questions, so what I'm going to do is do a kind of a brief explanation, and then I'll take any questions that anybody might have, just to make sure that it's clear kind of what had changed in the budget. When we were looking at the budget and where it was with regard to the tax cap, I had a number of questions about how certain costs were being accounted within the utilities, particularly the water and sewer. Typically, you want to isolate your debt service, so any loans you have, whether that's bonds or bands, on your capital projects, you isolate those payments from the actual operation and maintenance costs of those utilities. The operations and maintenance costs are then actually billed out as the rents per unit for those utilities, right? So similar to your electric bill or anything else you would have. When you do that and you isolate them, then that amount that is billed out counts, once you bill it out, coming back in as a revenue stream against that operations and maintenance cost, where the capital debt becomes part of the tax burden for those people who use that particular district of utility, okay? So in this town, you have basically, for all intents and purposes, you have 2 water districts, combined 3 and 4, and then you have Water District 5. 3 and 4 is down in the junction, and 5 is the majority of the town of Rotterdam. You then have systemically 2 systems of sewers, but there are multiple districts within each of those systems. So Sewer District 2, along with all of its extensions, 1 through 17, are all the collection that happens in Rotterdam and then is processed in the wastewater treatment plant in Rotterdam. Sewers 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are collected and then they are processed by the city of Schenectady in their sewer plant. Okay, just so you kind of have an idea. When you're looking at the budget, I think it helps to kind of group things that way. So what we looked at is when I went back through to see how these were all being accounted and picking them apart, we realized that the debt service was not being fully isolated from the operations and maintenance in the way that it was being reflected in the tax bill. They were actually all separated within the budget correctly, but the operations and maintenance wasn't being associated with a revenue stream that reflected the nature of the utility, if that makes sense. So on the expenditures, everything was kept separate as it should be, but when it came to the revenues against those, the only portion of the revenues that was going against the utilities was for the 2 different water systems, and that was the water usage fees, the $75 and $25 fees that people were billed in the spring were counting as revenues against that operations and maintenance cost. But the remainder of the operations and maintenance cost was being rolled into the tax bill. I'm sure everybody is aware that most state workers are still working from home, so even though we realized this quite some time ago in extensive discussions with our auditors, I was not comfortable making any changes of this kind of magnitude without getting concurrence from the Office of the State Comptroller, which came yesterday. So the good news is what we had wanted to do with separating out those different types of costs and ensuring that we reflected the revenue accurately against the right portions of that cost was indeed the way it should be done according to the State Comptroller's Office. So we have reflected that in this budget. Now, by doing those changes, you'll note if you go to the back of the budget where the summary is, so page, oh gosh. Yes, thank you, page 2.
I already have my notes.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Godlewski's on top of it.
Awesome, thank you. So when you go to the insert sheet back there on page 2, you can see that the debt service is all separated out from the operations and maintenance costs. And when you look at the amount to be raised from taxes, then, well, it's actually not on page 2 that you want. You want page 3. No, 4. You actually want 4. So, sorry, they're not numbered like this on my spreadsheets. So when you're actually looking at the rates give you, so where it's a rate, so like a percentage number, that's a tax rate. Where it's a flat number, it's per unit, and that is actually a per unit charge that will then become revenue to balance against the revenue side so that those utilities zero balance out when we're looking at it under the tax cap. So I am sure I've just caused everyone's eyes to completely glaze over. The actual costs for things haven't changed. It's purely a methodology in terms of the accounting that we have actually just literally picked apart all these lines in the budget to ensure that we're accounting for the tax portion as tax and the utility cost, that O&M cost, as a utility cost. So how is that going to affect you as the town person? On your tax bill right now, and I sat extensively with both the assessor and with the receiver of taxes on this as well, to make sure that we weren't going to induce any confusion. We want to make this very clear to people what exactly they're paying for and where it's coming from. So on your tax bill currently, if you're in a water district, you'll just have a line that says water district and an amount. That will change to be split. It will say water debt and the amount for the debt, which is in tax, and then it will, underneath that line, it'll say water O&M, and that'll be the amount that is the actual operations and maintenance cost of running that. So it will still appear on your tax bill. when it comes out in January, but you'll see that split out between those two lines, so that then when we receive the money in through the receiver of taxes, we can account for it properly in our office and apply it correctly. Same with sewer. So you'll see sewer, if you're in a sewer district right now, it just says sewer district. You'll still see that, it'll say sewer district, but rather it'll say sewer debt, and then below that it'll say sewer O&M. And then what we've done is to consolidate the billing, because it's silly to then bill most of it on the tax bill and then only a portion of it later on. There will not be that second water billing later. That has been incorporated into the tax bill. From my conversations with Diane Martin, she said that was definitely preferable for their office, and it would save them several $1,000s in billing out all those additional $75 and $25 bills. So she felt that that was wise in terms of saving taxpayer money and just making it easier for everybody, that will all be together on the January tax bill. So now that that is as clear as mud for everybody, I apologize, accounting is very, very unexciting, which is fine. Are there any questions about that and how it's being done, or what that has allowed us to do with the budget?
Ms. Greenwood, just to be clear, I'm going to use myself as an example. So I will not get a bill for my water for $75 in June.
Correct.
That will be in my January bill.
You won't even see that because it's already incorporated in that O&M line in your January bill.
Okay.
So, yes.
What does that do then for the tax, in terms of now we're not going over the tax cap? How does it look on paper for us?
I'm not quite following you.
Okay, well, before we were going to go over the tax cap.
Correct.
Now where
So now we're under. We're
Yeah.
under considerably. And again, and that is why I wanted to talk to the Office of the State Comptroller about what we were doing, because I wanted to ensure that they understood the thought process and what we were looking at, and they had the opportunity to ask any questions as well. And they felt that this was actually a more accurate way of accounting for the expenditures. There are several advantages of this long-term, if I can really bore everybody. I get really excited about water and sewer lines. To me, it's very interesting. So, yes.
Actually, before we go on, can we actually ask questions relative?
Absolutely, yep. We can stop here and ask questions, and then we
So
can...
two things come to mind for me is, as you know, these are benefited districts, and you can only charge those benefited users within those districts,
Correct.
those costs.
That is
Were they
correct.
somehow commingled into this?
Not at all. They were
Okay.
not. They were never commingled, and they are still not commingled.
Okay,
That is all, and that's a great question. And there are codes in the back here too that the assessor gives that specifically list out, if you look, there's either debt service or operations and maintenance costs for all the various districts that are kept specific to each parcel in the assessor's office so that it's taxed or billed appropriately.
okay, so let's just hit water for instance now. As you know, our current bills are, we do get the $75.
Correct.
And then, from my standpoint, I've been advocating this for some time with the board, is there is a separate charge that people don't realize that's ad valorem on their taxes that is for water. And that has occurred in the town of Rotterdam. Okay, so that's not a new thing for us. You know, I get an ad valorem tax on my water bill for my water district, specifically for my household as a benefited user of that district.
On which bill are you speaking?
On my
On your
January
tax bill?
That
Right,
is-
yes, and that's that line I said that used to say water district.
Okay, so.
Correct.
So again, from an accounting standpoint, that had been taken care of on all previous, you know, as long as I lived in Rotterdam.
Mhm.
So what I'm hearing from you guys again is now there's some change, okay, in how the accounting of that's been done, okay? You know, I look at it as straightforward because it's a water district. Obviously, the accounting for a water district is only for the benefited users
Correct.
within that district.
Mhm.
So I'm just wondering how the accounting is getting out of whack between the 2020 budget and the 2021 budget and how those line items are accounted for. But more importantly, I guess, is, you know, we know there's discussions on consolidation of those districts. And I'm wondering, is this the preemptive, hey, now let's set ourselves up to deal with the consolidation of those districts so that they are clearly now, we'll say, shown on a tax bill, okay, this year, because we know that we're working on the consolidation of those districts in 2022.
We have done nothing towards the consolidation at this point because we don't have the original records that are required to actually set up that process. This has to do with accounting correctly for what is actually debt service and what is operations and maintenance costs. Now, what this does set you up for going forward is the town is currently under a DEC consent order to meter all of the town within the next, I forget how many years, 7-ish years coming. So what this does, by segregating out that O&M from the debt, it sets you up so that as things are metered, you know exactly which lines to tie to the metering for that revenue stream, because now that has been isolated. So then as you're setting, and again, every district is completely segregated and separate from every other district, and it always has been. You've only just seen it as one line on your tax bill, but yours would have been different than a neighbor who's in a different district, right? So your amounts would have always been different. What had happened previously is the amount of the O&M less the 75 that was billed out separately plus the debt had been rolled into that one line. And that's how it had been accounted. Now, specific to each district, but it had been kind of just put under that one line. So what we're doing here is pulling that apart to make it much more transparent as to what is operations and maintenance, which is that matching revenue stream from the usage, and what is actually debt service, which is a tax, so that those are nice and clean. What this sets you up for, though, however, in the future is, should you apply, especially for federal grants, they would like to be able to see for every district in the town, they want to see it isolated between debt service and operations and maintenance costs. So there had been a grant, it was probably last spring, that I know the DPW had wanted to put in for, but they could not, based on the previous budgets, they could not say what those numbers were, what was specifically debt service and what was operations and maintenance costs. So they were not able to put in for that grant because they couldn't express that properly.
From my perspective, I'm looking at this and just going with the accounting again, when you're looking at debt service, as you know, it's units. Okay?
Correct.
So now I should be able to take whatever that charge is, okay, relative to those units, and they should equate, okay?
It should, and if you look at the assessor's sheet with those, it's all by units for certain aspects. Like, so when you go back down to the districts, it's by units, whereas for other things that are specifically tax related overall, like your homestead, non-homestead rate, that's by assessed value. And you'll see that in the backup pages that the assessor sends in for the budget.
So then moving forward, our O&M budget, okay, and now looking at O&M, it should be simply what is the total for district number 3, okay, for appropriations, okay. We know it's $75, okay. Obviously, from the public standpoint, do those costs, does the $75 now reconcile with the actual O&M costs, now that we're not commingling the debt service into those?
Not at all.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's never cost just $75.
Exactly, okay.
No, and that's
So
part of the
what
difficulty
is
as
that
well.
cost? Do we know that based on this budget?
Yeah, that's all broken out by cost, by district in the back there with those per unit rates that are in the back.
So our town residents now are actually going to see a new rate schedule associated with water for the 2021, I should say 2022 budget.
That's right in there, yes, that's in that back page. So that's in the traditional page that had all your estimated tax rates that has been reworked to reflect accurately what are tax rates and what are per unit values for the various districts. Mm-hmm.
So if I'm in, so I'm district number 5, what is my
District
O&M?
5 for water?
Yes, O&M charge now. And why do I ask? So instead of a $75 bill, there's going to be a new charge relative to that district.
So it's not, I wouldn't say new, because it's previously anything over the 75 plus the debt service was tied into that water district line on your tax bill.
The only reason I ask is the true accounting of what the value and the cost of water is in the town of Rotterdam now.
So if you look on this page 2 in the back, and if you look to water 5 at the very bottom, there's an O&M line. There isn't currently any debt for water 5. So your cost per unit for water in water 5 is $129.64. Now previously that would have been on your water line, a portion of that you would have seen on your tax bill under water district, and then the remaining 75 you would have gotten billed out in the spring. So now you can see very clearly exactly what you're paying. So, and it'll be like that for every water and sewer district. On your tax bill, you'll see water debt, water O&M, sewer debt, sewer O&M. So you'll very clearly know on your tax bill exactly what's going towards that service and what's the actual cost of the operations of that utility in that specific district.
So I'm just gonna ask one other follow-up question.
Sure.
We go to metering.
Correct.
Okay? So debt service is on our bill. We would actually receive some sort of quarterly bill or semi-annual bill for metered
That
water
I've seen done in
consumption?
multiple different ways in multiple different places. So, and that's a very interesting question. My recommendation at that point when you go to metering is to pull the operations and maintenance costs right off the tax bill entirely, because you're going to want to factor that separately based on the meters. And initially, it might be a little bit squirrely until you have a very good understanding of the overall usage. So that's something that's going to take some significant calculations. I have seen water billed several different ways. Some places bill it monthly, some bill quarterly, some bill biannually, and some bill once annually. That'll be up to the town board to decide how they want to take a look at that billing cycle, what they feel works best for the residents, but also that keeps the cash flow at a level where the Department of Public Works has the cash needed to keep up with the maintenance. So that's going to be an interesting question going forward that needs to be considered and solved. But certainly something that'll have to have a lot of thought.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
One has to pick their words very carefully. I'm not a taxpayer. 4 in the back.
4, okay. Take a
Under
look.
2022,
Okay. Yes.
I know
Some of
that-
these do not marry up with the previous ones, obviously, because of the change, so I'll start with that. So go ahead.
I was in here Monday, it was a draft final budget. I made the mistake of looking at it. It's a good thing I went in this afternoon, it still says draft, but when you go to the page, it says final. So I had to redo all my numbers, but that's okay. The question I have is, I'm looking at this and there's a column missing that had traditionally been off to the right.
Okay.
And it says percent change over the last year.
Right.
I also noticed in 2022 that there's dollar signs down that left column on that side.
Correct.
But the other column's showing a dollar sign.
Correct.
So what is the unit or metric? What is that telling me?
So where there's a dollar sign, that is per unit for those
For a
districts.
unit, what is a unit to you?
It depends on the district, and that is a question I had for DPW, but that is something that was set with DPW and the assessor before, and that is actually on each property tax bill for each property.
So
It
hence,
is a per unit charge.
that's why there's not a percentage change column, because there's nothing to match it up to.
Well, yes and no. So previously, no, it's
Well, I mean,
some,
I'm asking as a taxpayer.
okay,
And I've heard Mr. Dotson's question, and I don't have an accounting degree, I can assure you that. But I have to pay bills like everybody
yep,
else.
and that's why, the point of this was to try to make it easier for people to know what they're actually paying. So on a lot of these before, there was a mix between some were rates and some were actually per unit costs. And it wasn't delineated by putting a dollar sign. I felt like it would be a lot easier for people to read if they knew which ones were a per unit cost and which ones were an actual rate percentage.
The
So-
question is, my initial question, there was a column there.
There was
that gave you
indeed.
an indication of percent increase. If you're comparing apples to apples, show me the apple. This is showing me apple to oranges.
And some of these
It's
are,
very confusing.
you're right, it
I've
is.
been around this for 20-some years, and believe me, my head was spinning.
Okay,
All right?
Yeah. No, that's
And
legitimate.
all I'm saying to you is, because believe me, I'm glad I'm not in the water department to receive our taxes come January. Because when you change the configuration, they're gonna be beating those doors down, because if I don't understand it, how the heck is the average taxpayer gonna understand it?
so, and that's part of making it more transparent and correct. And that's when I talked with the receiver of taxes, she felt that this was a much easier budget and process to explain, and she was quite comfortable with that, as were the DPW folks I spoke
Well,
with.
That's one.
If you would like to see percent changes, I can certainly do the math for you on the things that
Well,
are
is
the
it-
same
is it for
rates,
me?
but.
All right? And we're basically saying here, we're changing how we've been doing business in this town for 50 years.
Correct, and we are much more in alignment with the state
And I'm an old
comptroller.
timer, okay? I survived to this far, and I don't like change, but I understand shit. All right, now, let's go to page 2 on the attachments,
Okay.
please.
Hold on one second, let me flip my pages. Page 2, go ahead.
It took me a while to understand what this represents, but after listening to the discussion going back and forth, first question I have, you have shifted some of the non-homestead to the homestead.
That is not correct.
I got the percentages right here, and I'm gonna tell you how you did it, I'm looking for an answer. Your preliminary budget, you said the assessed value of commercial property is $494 million.
So there was a change.
Would you let me finish? Now, all of a sudden, it says $556 million. Now,
Correct.
was there a dramatic error by the assessor? Or are we doing another different formula? Or have we changed property classes to get there?
No. So we get the numbers, the assessor gets the numbers several times through the year from the county in terms of assessed values.
Quite
He
aware how
gives
process.
a preliminary set of numbers to our office,
Yeah.
that is what we start working with. And then the county updates those numbers and gives us the final set of numbers, which this reflects. So the final set of numbers was different from the earlier set we were working with, and so we corrected them to the new numbers given by the county. So there was no change on our end, it was a change from the county that we did use as our base for what's taxable value in the
And
town.
I know how to find yours too. So, if I foil tomorrow for the delta between the 494 and the 556, you'll give me all the SPL numbers that were added to get that dollar increase.
So, no, there's actually, I can give you the piece of paper that all this information comes off of. And it shows the initial set of numbers and what was used, and then what they asked us to use. There
I know,
have been,
but they draw from the same database.
correct,
To give each town where they can apportion the county tax by assessed value to every town.
Yeah.
Believe me, I was here in '07 and it was screwed up.
okay. Well, I am telling you
And
that
that's why I'm asking.
if you would like to call Bob Zick at the county, he and I have
Bob
very
Zick
long.
wouldn't talk to me
Okay,
because
well-
I'm not an elected official or
Well,
the
he
town
is.
financial director.
Okay,
I've
well,
been there, please. I've been around too long. I know how to go into a dead wall and I stay around from it. All I'm saying is, by increasing that value, okay, you reduce the burden on the business. Because as you're well aware, in August, the assessor gives you homestead versus non-homestead, and that sets the ratio of who's gonna pay what.
correct.
Now-
And you'll notice that both numbers changed, not just the
Of
homestead.
course, believe me, I had to go back and redo the calculation. Now, what's really interesting on this sheet, and it's always been shown here, appropriated fund balance.
Correct.
And for the first time, as long as I can remember, nothing's being shown accounting-wise. And I worked for GE for 37 years, so I know how accountants can make numbers dance and come out with what they want. And it's amazing, nothing's being appropriated.
Correct.
All right, now, the other thing, I couldn't
Mr.
understand.
Godlewski, I hate to cut you short, but can you ask a question if you have questions? Some of this is commentary, and I appreciate your opinion on
It's
these
facts.
things.
When you want to hear the facts on the record.
I know, but I don't,
No, hold-
you, at privilege of the floor, you're welcome to
No,
come
no,
up and
no.
speak about your facts, but we're at,
It
she
is
asked if
not-
there were questions, Mr.
It is
Godlewski.
not privilege of the floor.
Correct, you can come up at privilege
You
of the
said
floor with
anybody can
us.
ask questions.
Questions,
Mr.
correct.
Johnson,
Questions.
I'm asking questions, whether you like the questions.
Mr. Godlewski,
You're afraid
questions,
to
I'm a litigator, I ask questions, I understand what they are, they end with a question mark, you know that as well. So if you have questions, I would just ask you to ask questions. If you have a
Okay.
question,
All
ask
right,
a
In other
question.
words, I hit a nerve.
No, I'm objecting as a litigator with the rules of evidence. I apologize, but I don't let Mr. Signori ask things that aren't questions in a courtroom. I need you to ask a question,
She's
okay?
objecting to the form of the question, Bob, is what she's saying.
In other words, you can ask a question, but you're gonna ask it legally, not like a taxpayer would ask it.
No, you're welcome to ask a question in a question form.
We are here to ask questions. of
Questions,
why.
yes, sir, questions.
So,
Mr. Godlewski, I appreciate your opinions, and when you tell me there are facts, I always consider everything you tell me, but I need you to ask a question, because otherwise it's gonna be a really long night while we listen to your understanding of how things have been done for the past 25 years.
To an extension, it's zero there now. And I have the answer, you have the answer. You
No answers, questions, sir.
You had 1.2 there. Now it's zero. That's because the way you changed the math.
I'm
That's what
sorry,
you've done.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
What I'm asking is this, in preliminary budget, that column said 1.2
Which
million.
column?
Under operation and maintenance for sewer district 2. Now it's zero, all right?
So is your question, why is it zero?
Why is it zero?
Okay, I can rephrase your questions if that's helpful.
Right,
Ms. Greenwood, why is it zero?
So it is zero because we are no
I don't
longer,
get water.
I'm just trying to help.
Listen,
I want everyone who's watching this leader to understand what the question was too, because if you have the question, everyone has the question.
Alright.
I want to make sure everyone understands the answer as
okay,
well.
so let's just walk down through this chart, because I think that'll help
well, I only
everybody.
have the
Nope,
two
you
areas
asked,
I
I'm
was
helping you with your
I
question.
know the other answer.
So, if you look across on sewer 2 and extensions O&M, the initial column, the 1.5 million, is the appropriations. That is the total cost for the operations and maintenance of sewer district 2 and extensions. Less estimated revenues, that is the that is the actual sewer rents. Remember that we talked, it's gonna show up on your tax bill as sewer O&M. That is the amount there. So there is zero appropriated fund balance being used against that. There is no tax being raised against that because it is all paid by using those sewer rents. There are 3,927.08 units. I have no idea how you get a 0.08 of a unit. I have asked that question myself, but I was told this was set in terms of units. Sometimes it's based on a grease trap or the number of bathrooms or this, that. I'm
There
not,
should be a defined rate structure.
correct. Well, that's on my list.
That's
So, and then we take the amount, basically, of our amount that we need to raise, we divide it by the units, and we find that it will cost each unit in Sewer District 2, $384.95 for the operations and maintenance of that sewer district. So that is how those lines work as you go across them. So hopefully that makes it a little more clear for everybody how those are being calculated.
The reason it shows zeros is because that was the operation and maintenance, not the debt. Every other thing on here with dollars and cents says debt.
No, that's not actually the case. So you're using, revenue gets applied against operations and maintenance costs. It does not get applied against debt. Taxes get applied against debt. So there are no revenues to go against the debt service, which is why anyone that has debt service, you'll see a zero in the less appropriated revenues column. There's still no fund balance being used in any of these, which was a decision the board made. When they realized that this could be done, they decided to not use any of that fund balance that they'd like to keep for a rainy day, which is a very wise decision in my opinion. And then you'll look, so anytime there's a debt service, when you look over, you'll see that that amount is meant to be raised by taxes, and that will equal the appropriations required. Anytime that it's O&M, you'll see that in the revenues column, so those balance out. So that's how you're getting those columns to all balance. That's why when you look at the bottom, your total appropriations is the 27 million. The revenues is the 14 million, which comes predominantly from the revenue against those O&M lines, which is that sewer or water rent that you're paying. And then the amount to be raised by taxes is the actual tax amount that covers the debt in the various districts, but that also is what goes against your general and highway funds to actually cover those costs. So that's how you balance out across the bottom there. So I,
And I asked you the question. You mentioned in the beginning, you were waiting for the controller's office to get back to you. But how long ago did you recognize this could be a different way of doing it?
She
Probably 9 months ago, when I started working with our auditors, and we had some conversations about the way the budget was being constructed.
Okay, I only have,
Maybe more than that, I don't know, maybe 8.
well, can I assume that that's why we passed the resolution to go over the tax cap? Because we're waiting for the answer from the controller as to whether we could change?
We did not pass the resolution to go over the tax cap. It was actually on for tonight. We had a public hearing.
Were you
Public
hedging?
hearing.
Were you hedging?
We were making sure that we were able to fund the government into the next year.
Just asked the question.
Yeah.
If you asked a question, that didn't make sense. We never passed such a resolution. We had a public hearing.
That's right, to go over the tax.
That's right,
Correct.
part of the process, a public hearing. You said pass the resolution.
I know, but.
We need to fund the government for next year either way, and we need to make sure that we do it legally. So, yes, we were waiting.
Right, because you were
Yep.
waiting for that interpretation.
We were waiting to confirm that we were correctly following the law and that the Office of State Comptroller was okay with this and that it was the appropriate way. I mean, a lot of things in this town are done the same way because that's how we've always done it, and that doesn't make it legal or proper. And I'm the #1 proponent of making sure we're doing it
Or immune from
properly.
change, either.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is, if you hadn't called for that public hearing, you were forced by law to approve that budget by November 20th. True or false?
I'm not sure of the
That
legalities
is
of that, I
true. Take my
apologize.
word for it.
I don't think so.
One last
I don't
question,
think so.
and
I'm sorry,
done.
I can't hear you.
No.
One last question and I'm
Yeah.
done.
You promise?
I promise. I told my wife I'd be home at 7:30.
I mean,
Oh, you got 9 minutes more.
you better hurry.
Now,
I think she'll forgive you when you're
there's
late.
nothing better than change. But I've been involved in budgets for, I hate to say it, over 50 years, okay? All I'm gonna say is this, from what I'm hearing tonight, and I'm really quite shocked. We've had this tax cap in place a long time, 10 years, 11 years. I work with some of the best controllers, the smartest accountants that this town ever had. And I'm gonna throw out John Polino's name. And I find it hard to believe that a man of his background and experience would not have noticed that we could have counted, because all we're doing is taking an expense, making it a revenue on the books. So we don't call it a tax, because if we didn't do this, we would definitely go over the tax cap. And my concern is, if we go forward with this methodology, will we ever go over the tax cap? Because what that's gonna do, it's gonna allow you to raise revenue more than you could in the past.
Mr. Godlewski, I'm astonished every day by the things that are uncovered that have been done wrong for 50 years of the town. It is what made me reluctant to run for re-election in this town, frankly. Every time you look into something, there was something done improperly. And I'm not saying it was for, people did it on purpose.
I mean,
Under the guise of
and
that's
that's
the
not-
way it's always been done.
And that's not to, tarnish anyone's reputation. I don't know any of these people. I did not grow up here. I only know the people that I've interacted with as an adult and professionally. So I don't know Mr. Polino or his background. I don't know any of these people. I just know that I feel strongly as an attorney, as a member of this board, that we do things properly and that we don't perpetrate a fraud on the public. So I am sorry that you want to be able to switch back and forth and you think this is going to lead to other things in the future. I hope your future elected officials will continue to work to create a conservative budget, as I've always strived to do, that keeps this government running and provides the services that we try to provide.
And have a good night, everybody.
You too, Mr. Godlewski.
Yeah, you got 6 minutes, Mr.
I
Galuski.
know.
If you get a speeding ticket, come see me, okay?
You are now soliciting work from the dais.
There's some confusion in terms of the questions that are being asked, because there seems to be sort of this idea that we're conflating different things. There are some things that are taxes, there are some things that are not taxes.
I mean, a good example was the brush fee we had previously was not a tax. You couldn't deduct it from your taxes. And likewise, we figured out that this really should not have been set up as a tax that people are deducting from their taxes. And when we back it out, it costs the same to the people, but it brings us under the tax cap because it shouldn't have been a tax. And then it allows people to get their star rebate money. Is that correct, Ms. Greenwood? which means they're actually gonna get, some money back.
So, and I will say, I don't know the people that came before either. I'm sure they were doing what they thought was an excellent job. I think that sometimes a fresh set of eyes and asking a lot of questions just gives you a different opportunity to see what can be done. And I would not say anything to disparage anybody who had come before. I just started asking questions of our auditor. And again, I've worked in multiple municipalities. I'm familiar with different ways of doing things, and I asked questions. So that's it.
So I just wanted to say that, comment on that. Thank you, by the way.
You're welcome.
So not an easy topic to get out here. What is frustrating though, okay, and when I get privilege of the floor, I'll have this conversation. Why does the board believe, okay, this is my opinion, that we cannot handle a conversation like tonight, okay, in advance? Why did we wait to the 11th hour?
Honestly, I had the same conversation as we were doing this, whether we should even roll this out for January. And what it came down to was, should we, if we didn't deal with it, people were not gonna get their star rebates. And so this was a last minute discussion, and that's why I asked Beth to be present to come up and speak to it, because I don't think I have the math or accounting background to properly address this issue. But yes, all these issues come up quickly, and as a board, we have to deal with them quickly, and I appreciate being able to have this conversation. It was just a matter of a judgment call about what's best for our residents.
And I will say too, a lot of this, I did not bring up to the board as early as I might have, because I was not sure that we would have answers or be able to deal with it in any way that was coherent. And they were dealing with trying to understand how to craft a budget that would keep them under the tax cap in the way that they've always done it. And by the time I realized that this might be a possibility, we were well into the process.
And to be fair, these are the things that come up that we're trying to deal with when, some of us and the town attorney are not available to do things like prepare the agenda and do administrative tasks, because we're having hard conversations about, what did the Office of State Comptroller say? Okay, now do the legal research and make sure this is legally permissible. And then, how do we write the resolution to address it? Do we need a resolution to address it? How do we present it? These are the things, these are the inner working, this is how the sausage is made. You're hearing it now.
And just to add one thing to that, when you already have people in the audience that are just witch hunting for conspiracies, okay?
But Evan, let's not even go there.
Well, let me finish my statement. And we want to make sure that what we do dispense are facts, and until you hear from the Office of State Comptroller, we don't have facts. So, you throw theories out there, or what ifs out there can muddy the waters even more, because not everybody likes to use facts. They like to use their opinions. I mean, your questions were very valid, very lucid, and very fair. And I think,
Some of the day, to be fair, when this was brought to the board's attention, I was probably the harshest critic of this and asked some difficult questions that required additional follow-up and research from, our staff. These guys who research and vet all of my bizarre, intricate questions. I think Beth was actually quite frustrated with me by my questions, but also it required consultation with 2 other offices during a season that's leading up to their very busy season. So this is why things do end up being sometimes what appears to be last minute, plus until we decided that we weren't going to get through everything we needed to tonight and put on a resolution to add a meeting so that we have time to deal with some further issues. We were still trying to finish everything that needed to be done during the fiscal year. So this had to be done in order to get numbers out to the county so that they can get everything set up for the tax bills to go out. So again, I apologize when things are delayed or they come on last minute. Yes, we talked about how to present this to the public, and I asked Beth to be present to present it because I didn't feel qualified to do it.
Yeah. And on behalf of this board, who has, worked side by side with Beth throughout this whole process, a very sincere thank you on the many, many, many hours that you have put into this, especially being active military and were deployed recently, and you still were able to get through it and communicate with us and serve your country. So for that, a very heartfelt thank you.
Yeah.
And a great deal of appreciation.
Beth was working on active duty, and then at night going through our stuff, our budget stuff, responding to our questions, making updates, consulting with other people. So she was basically working multiple jobs while on active duty.
Lest
so-
we also forget you working on a day you had off, coming back the night before from your deployment.
Yep, she came
Meeting with
here.
myself and Mr. Gittarelli at your house, opening your house to us up, all those things. Can I ask one more question regarding this?
Absolutely.
I think we agreed, or we talked about this, and I know that when we were fearful of going over the budget, over the tax cap, we took away the 100,000 from the highway department. That's now back in there,
That is
correct?
correct. So
All
we
right.
did make some changes,
Yeah,
and
well,
I did not get to that.
I want them to hear that.
apologize.
And
So
then
yes,
we had to cut 3 vehicles, well, we were 3 vehicles requested, we cut it down to 1, now we're up to 2 vehicles for the
Correct,
police.
yes.
Okay, that's what we were
The
able to
gentleman
do.
over there you had your hand up, sir.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry, I
have a
can't see
question.
through the.
Okay,
I apologize.
Not an expose, but did the allocation of the $1 million of federal emergency towards the Viaport and the $500,000 of the property tax have any material effect on this budget?
They did not, because they were applied towards things that were outside of the budget, out of the normal budget process. In consulting with the board, they did not want to apply the ARPA funds to anything that was normal town business because it would be unsustainable. The problem with a windfall like that is if you use that to fill gaps, then you end up in a worse place when you no longer have that revenue stream. So those funds have been allocated towards things that were typically outside of the budget. And so you see those reflected in this budget. The current year obviously didn't show up in the 2021 budget because that had long since been done. That was the resolution that you would have seen, I believe that was on 2 weeks ago, is that, or last week? Where they accepted those funds and they applied those towards the work that's happening at the Viaport to be able to move the town hall and the police department there, and also to buy the property to eventually have a park on the west side of town. They chose to then also apply monies out of the next round of ARPA again towards the final build out at the Viaport location, and also they have that earmarked to serve as the town's matching grants or matching funds should they receive a particular grant from the federal government that they're working on as well to address improvements at the wastewater treatment plant. So that basically doubles the value of it, right? So you use that to leverage to get a much larger grant as your matching fund, and so then you get basically an entire grant for free that you would normally have to have a fairly large match portion too.
So you're saying the rest of the ARPA funds are being used for Viaport?
Not all of them, no.
More of that.
More of them, and then also as matching funds towards this federal grant.
Do we have any estimates of what the cost is going to be to renovate the Kmart for all the town offices? Is there any
I don't
numbers
have
out
that
there?
information in front of me right now.
Ballpark.
I have been told it will be, well, right now they've got $2 million allotted, and the lease agreement says that should it go over $2 million, it will require board approval for any additional expenditures.
So there's been no studies, no architectural design?
There
done?
is, that I just don't have that personally.
Did anyone else have any questions about the budget and the changes to the billing? Yeah, Ms. Freer.
So I just have questions regarding the budget. Where do we find the total expenditures for the budget? Like the
That's on
overall-
the bottom of that line, so if you'll go to the back pages, so that one, if you look at the bottom of page, I believe it's 2. Yeah, here, I can show you. So do you have that back page 2? Yep, so this is the total, that is the total appropriations. This is the revenue, so if you look down the columns, that's revenues, and this is the amount to be raised by
More
taxes,
copies.
which comes right down there.
I need a monster
So-
drink.
There you
Talk
go.
about any of
But Steve's selfish.
I knew what was gonna happen.
It's all about Steve all the time.
So in November, you guys had the, residential tax at $3.85 per 1,000 of assessed value, and the commercial or the non-homestead at $8.80. It's now up to $4.22 for the residential and $8.19 for non-homestead. Can you just talk about those changes?
Where are you looking?
So I have, I'm correct, these are the,
So that is the,
that would be the non-homestead for next year. And this
what
would be
page
the
are you on?
homestead.
I'm just trying to get on the same page 4.
And it's changed since November and changed since October, so I just wanna.
Correct, yep, every time there's a change in the budget, that changes.
Okay, so
And it's just a mathematical factor based on the assessed value and those appropriations.
And is that based on the fact that the county just got back to you with new assessment values, or?
So, so if you go back to the page where it shows the full assessed values, right here, that had changed after my discussions with the county, so that affects the rates.
Okay.
or the final tax amounts, because that rate is what it's used to calculate.
Okay, and we're under the tax cap, correct?
Yes, considerably. Did anyone else have any questions? I never knew that budgets could be so exciting. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Greenwood, again, for all your hard work.
And your own personal sacrifices too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Marco, we have a public hearing this evening.
The proposed plan of dissolution of the Rotterdam Fire Protection District, and nobody signed up.
Ms. Marco, Ms. McGraw, would you want to give like a 3-minute overview of what's going on with this for those who have been following this movie?
That seems like a really long time. So the existing.
About 30 seconds.
That's
Yeah.
fine. The existing underlying district was initially a fire protection district as opposed to a fire district. So there's some distinct differences with respect to, legally what they're allowed to do in terms of bonding and a variety of other different things. And so the Platterkill Fire Protection District put forth through its attorney, Terry Hannigan, a plan to create a fire protection district and to dissolve the underlying fire protection district. And so the hearing tonight is for the dissolution. You previously created the district back in, Val, they created, I think, in the last meeting in September, and maybe in the first meeting in October. And so this public hearing is a legal requirement for the dissolution under General Municipal Law 17-A. So I know that there have been some comments or some questions in terms of consolidation of water and sewer district. That is the same series of statutes that you would do to also engage in consolidation in relation to that. So the final dissolution plan is available in the town clerk's office and is also on the town's website. So for people who are interested in seeing more about that, it is there. I know that that they're in the process of naming their fire commissioners and then also filling their offices, which they'll do by December 31st of this year. So I would expect I would just note that you'll have then a full resolution on the 29th. I received so I know that, we're sort of having this discussion about transparency and those sorts of things today, and so I received the final dissolution document this afternoon after 3 p.m. So we'll use that document of which to premise, findings and determinations of the town board, which will be, I would expect will be an agenda item for the meeting on the 29th.
And this takes the town board out of the fire business, basically, is that fair to say?
Well, I think there's oftentimes confusion about what a municipal corporation is under Section 2 of the General Municipal Law, but a fire district is its own separate taxing entity and its own separate municipal corporation. A school district is its own separate municipal corporation, and when you act on behalf of the water and sewer districts, those also are their own separate municipal entities. So it's the town board acting on behalf of the district, and so there's a variety of different methods that you could use to create the districts. We don't have a board of supervisors in Schenectady County. Instead, we have a county manager. We don't have a county executive like Albany does, and so there's no board of supervisors for a lot of this district information to go to. And so, yes, it is, we are not in the fire protection business. And I think that, there's a reason why special districts are self-sustaining, right? Because the idea behind a special district is that there's a need, and then the residents either express the need, right, through the petition process of Article 12 of the town law, right, or the town board brings its own map plan and report, and then you subsequently wind through that process, and there's a permissive referendum element to it. So there's also a permissive referendum element to this dissolution of the fire protection district, and then that's how the people have the ability to have more added input in relation to that process.
Thank you so much. All right, anyone on public hearing tonight? Going once. Anyone on public hearing tonight? Anyone on public hearing tonight? Okay, I'm officially declaring the public hearing closed. Public comment privilege of the floor. Ms. Marco, you want to call people up that are on the list?
Nelson Knapp,
I remind you all, you'll have 4 minutes to speak. At the 3rd minute, I'll give you a little wave. I really don't want to cut anybody off, but I'd like to try to help with everybody's help stay to the 4 minutes, please.
Nelson Knapp, Cherry Avenue. I'm wondering what the stance on the board is on cannabis being sold in town. Yes or no question? Have you made a decision on cannabis being sold in town? Well, we have to the end of this month to opt out of sales.
It hasn't been added to an agenda.
Well, I'll go on record as saying I don't think cannabis being sold in town is going to be a benefit. I know someone's going to say, hey Nelson, we're going to make some money off of it. Like the last time I came down to the board and I said, I don't think having Walmarts in town will be a benefit to us. And he looked at me and said, what's the problem? I says, having the smallest Walmarts in town, and we're still going to have a lot of shoplifting and tie up the police down there. And then I was immediately corrected by a board member 20 some odd years ago, and they said to me, it will not be the smallest Walmarts around here. It will be the second smallest Walmarts. And I stand corrected. And I've been down there, every other time I'm down there, there's a police car down there. So I'm just saying maybe we can't, something to not encourage it being sold here. I don't care if they get it anyplace else, but it always seems to be trouble when you have something like that. You can always hear about a bar being closed down for some reason because someone's getting drunk, fights, or gunshot. Question number 2 is if we proceed with the purchase of the Kmarts and move the town over there, what will happen to this building? How will it be utilized or sold?
I believe the plan is to sell these buildings.
The plan is to sell the buildings, and in the draft, or the preliminary budget, it's budgeted for a revenue of $350,000, which is a conservative estimate.
Thank you. I've been a custodian at a school for the past 38 years, and I'm retired, so I will probably see you again now since I'm not working on second shift.
How's retirement, sir? You enjoying it?
It's terrible.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your input.
Victor Murdoch?
Given that Steve's not here tonight, this will probably be pretty short. First off,
I think we all know
Samantha,
your feelings.
Diane, thank you so much for responding to my emails regarding agendas. You know, as a resident of Rotterdam, I mean, just seeing what happened tonight was just absolutely embarrassing. I can only imagine from your side of the docket here that it's been chronic. It's been contemptuous from a citizen standpoint. We hear, you know, the notions of conspiracy being thrown at us. You know, when you create an information vacuum, it creates these thoughts. And it's not just here. I think we see it across the board. There were some major decisions that were made over the last month since the election, where millions of dollars of commitments are being made by this town board, and agendas are coming out an hour before the meeting, and then in this case, not even on time for the meeting. And it's, you know, it's humiliating. And I can only imagine how it is for you guys. And again, you've seen the emails. Thank you for your response. Just on another note, you know, to Joe and to Steve, you know, the electoral fortunes didn't go your way, but I've kind of got to know you guys at least a little bit with you, Steve, and Joe, obviously a lot more deeper with you over the last few years. And I hope that you guys remain engaged, you know, with the community. You know,
I plan on that, Mr. Murdoch. Rest assured. I will probably be out there asking the same questions of the new board as were asked of me.
And just demanding the board and
Pointing
all
out
of
the
us.
flaws and the...
Just for ourselves, just information. You know, for me, the deadline's
I
Friday.
really don't need to do that, Mr. Signor. Some of
Every
us are
few
still
minutes
gonna
to
be
forgive
here.
the vine, you know, right?
And I would just end on this. You know, Joe and I have gone back and forth, and the language has been pretty straightforward. And
You don't hold back, Mr. Murdock.
but again,
I'd rather.
there's no misunderstanding where I'm coming from.
I say, I'm thank God he likes us, because I can imagine if he hates us.
You know what? the
But
good
it
thing
shows
about-
concern, rather than contempt. I hope that you see it that way.
And I take it no other way, sir. I have nothing
And,
to get most
and the good
respect.
thing about being so direct, Mr. Murdoch, no one's ever gonna wonder where you stand.
That's right. So there's no
And I myself
misunderstanding.
appreciate that.
But I've had these emails to Steve, and instead of Joe coming back to me saying, let's have a cup of coffee, zero. And that's the general gist that I've seen from that chair for 4 years. It's just contempt, hubris, and arrogance. And so while I wish you gentlemen to remain engaged, I really just hope that Steve has a time of reflection for himself about why he didn't get 35% of the vote and in the primary. And for you, Joe, there should be a Rotterdam Medal of Honor for you putting yourself out there and really, thank you, for doing that.
Thank you.
And I really feel that for you two guys, Steve had a material effect on the election on November 4th. And I really hope that the new board coming in, again, is not being hamstrung by some of the incredible amounts of money that are being spent. And it seems like in the darkness of night. Hey, you can say,
No, to your
let me
point.
just finish?
Sure, absolutely, I apologize.
Try not to
I
go
thought you
against
were
the 4 minutes.
I apologize, sir.
My understanding is, again, they haven't been consulted, brought into the process, and everything is just going bing, bang, boom on this. To take $1 million from that federal emergency aid and to put it towards Viaport. You tell me there's not 20 projects out there in this town that could have used $50,000. Like that was, and now we find out there's more of it going towards that. And there's no documents out there showing what it's going to cost to renovate it, what the cost benefit analysis, that was just in my email to you, to the board last week. I mean, this is major stuff that the town is looking to do. And there just seems to be an incredible level of disrespect to the public that, I think I heard these words of platitude, that the people are sovereign. And the election was spoken, and you know that these people were very hesitant about Viaport, if not running against it. And yet this stuff got rammed through in the last month after the election. And it's troubling to me. And I'll just leave it at that. I'm probably up against the minutes, and again, I wish the new board all the best going forward. Gentlemen, I wish you all the best going forward, and continue this conversation when you're on this side, of the docket, and the best to everybody in holidays and Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, wherever you're at.
Yeah.
Health and happiness into the new year, and let's all work together, again, for transparency, for commitment to each other, communication, information, and all the best.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch.
Thank you,
Mr. Murdoch, you gonna let me sit next to you when I'm out there?
We'll put name tags out. Anyway, all the best.
All right, sir, happy holidays to you, thank you.
Wade Abbott?
I'm just grateful I don't have to say good morning. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, I'm as guilty as anybody. We're running a long meeting, trust me. Good evening, my name is Wade Abbott. I live on Fierro Avenue. Tonight I'm coming to you in my official capacity as the president of Mohonasen's Board of Education. If you don't have enough excitement here, feel free to come to our meetings. You're always welcome. I also want to point out that one of my fellow board members, Erica Montegino, is here as well. And I'd like to share a letter, and it is fairly brief. It's only 30 pages long, no, 2 pages. On behalf of my colleagues on the school board and on behalf of our superintendent, I have brought copies for each of the board members, the town attorney, and the town clerk. If I can give that to you. Thank you. There should be enough for everybody, even those absent. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the letter. Dear members of the Rotterdam Town Board, as you currently consider whether or not to opt out of hosting cannabis retail outlets, dispensaries, and lounges within the town limits, we write to urge you to formally opt out of these establishments within the town. Now, whether or not you individually or corporately support the recreational use of marijuana for adults, the town simply has too little information right now to make an informed decision in this matter. So it should take the conservative route of opting out in the short term, at least. If more information is known later, the town board would be able to reconsider, but it is our understanding that if you do not opt out at this time, you will relinquish your right to do so in a future date. As elected officials in Rotterdam, the Mohanison the Board of Education serves more than 2,800 students and their families. And even though the cannabis question has not been brought before us directly, we do owe it to our students and families to weigh in on this topic, as it most certainly will affect our families in the months and years to come. The Board of Education rejects making decisions in haste and ignorance. We take a very cautious approach to just about any decision that we make in our school board meetings. And in the present situation, I think the town board has an opportunity to press pause by opting out. We recognize that once again, New York State has put public servants like you in a difficult position. While cannabis consumption was recently legalized for adults 21 years or older, the rules for the establishment and operation of marijuana dispensaries have not been created or published. Yet the state is plunging ahead and is requiring public officials like you to make a rapid decision on whether or not the town should opt out of these facilities. With an end-of-the-year deadline rapidly approaching, and with the inability to opt out after that deadline, the state has not made this easy on you. Without knowing the rules and regulations governing dispensaries and marijuana sales, we are deeply concerned that there could be significant and negative unintended consequences for our students' families and for the school district as a whole. We strongly recommend taking a cautious approach right now, and we ask you to take the urgent actions necessary to hold a public hearing and pass a local law to opt out. Now, once the rules have been firmly established and the consequences of those actions, of those rules are better understood, then the Rotterdam Town Board could come back and make a well-informed decision on how to approach this issue. Perhaps at that time it would make sense to opt in. Perhaps it will not. Unfortunately, if the town does not opt out now, this month, the option to do so will not exist next year. In Schenectady County, the towns of Glenville and Niskuna already passed local laws to opt out until the rules are established. And most recently, just this week, I believe, the Schenectady City Council announced its intention to do the same. As fellow public servants, we understand the difficult position in which you have been placed, but we still urge you to take this cautious approach. Thank you for your consideration of our concerns. And please feel free to contact us with any questions. Yours in public service, the Mohanison Board of Education and Superintendent of Schools. That's signed by myself and our Superintendent, Mr. Shannon Shine. It's also on behalf of Chad McFarland, our Vice President, Deborah Escobar, Lisa Gagliotti, Stacy McTurk, Eric Montegino, who's here today, and Julie Power. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer any. Otherwise,
Appreciate your.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Next is Bob Dalbuski, but I believe he's left.
I gotta get home to his wife.
Jack Dotson?
I have to get home to my children that I haven't seen all day.
I kept her for a 4-hour meeting on Monday, so.
Yes. I hear you.
Good evening, Jack Dotson, 1311 Cipriano Terrace. Mine was 4, down to 2. I'll make it quick. Resolution here for the supervisor to negotiate and execute an agreement relative to sewer district number 7, extension number 2. We know what that pertains to. I gotta believe the negotiations are over. We have potentially an executed agreement. Is it available yet?
We do not have an
Okay.
executed agreement.
Okay, so it's still being negotiated.
It's down to final wording, I guess, going back and forth between attorneys.
So we're meeting with their clients tonight at 6 o'clock, and we have not received their feedback and
Okay.
revisions.
We were hoping to have it ready for tonight, but they were not prepared.
Okay, so just to follow up on that, because we're having this conversation regarding units again tonight, which is important, that agreement will result in some sort of a unit schedule for them.
No, I don't believe it. Do you want me to answer your questions as you go along, or?
It would be helpful, again,
I've seen so many versions.
Yeah.
The last one I saw, I don't believe it has a schedule.
So the 30,000-foot view is that when you have a sewer district, you can raise funds in relation to that sewer district on 3 separate bases. It can be on a benefited basis, which would be General Municipal Law 14F. It could be on an ad valorem basis, which is based upon your assessed value, and that sometimes can be, that lives in the real property tax law, and so that is viewed in this, by the eyes of the state of New York as a property tax. And then there's something called special assessment, which is a wacky hybrid of the two. And so the Sewer 7 Extension 2 was created on a benefited basis with EDUs that were contained in a map plan and report. And that map plan and report has not changed, and those EDUs will not change.
thank you. So just following up on that, so we had the conversation regarding units tonight, okay? Does the town have those schedules for each district that adds up to the number in the budget? So if you assign units, we're just talking sewer now, and there are some crazy numbers in there, okay? Of the total number of units, and I think the question was, I don't know how we get to a
Are you
.08.
Are you really talking about EDUs?
I'm not talking about the sewer schedule for those
Well,
districts.
Which would be premised upon the 4 items that you can use in terms of the creation of an actual cost basis for your sewer, right? So that's
Are
gonna
they
be-
published and established so that there's continuity, okay, from one year to the next?
Yes, they're contained.
And are they
in the
available?
budget. I think the difficulty is that when we look at something from our understanding, it sometimes inhibits our ability to see the way that it could be, right? So the law sets forth the ways that you can establish a sewer rent, and you haven't been doing that, right? That's what Beth discovered, and that's why we began seeking all the documents in relation to every district and every single extension, right? Because if some random district extension was based on an ad valorem basis, then how could we equitably then shift that into a consolidated district ultimately, right? Those were the sorts of issues that we began discussing initially. And I think through this process, I was never aware that this was on the tax bill. I don't live in this municipality. I live in a neighboring municipality. I don't receive a tax bill from the town, and I don't have any reason to look at them unless I receive a legal question about it, and I haven't. So when you look at the tax bill, things that can be contained on that bill include taxes, period, end of sentence, right? So if it's not an ad valorem assessment, and it's not a special assessment, it may not appear on your tax bill. So there's that. So then you have debt service, treatment costs. You then also have operation and maintenance, right? And then those things come together in each of these districts. Now, one underlying district may have debt, another one may not, and you oftentimes see that issue with sewer districts. And so with respect to that, there is still an operation and maintenance spread across what Director of Finance Greenwood was discussing, which is there's sewer 2, which goes to our wastewater treatment plant, and then there's sewer 1, 3, 4, 5, 5A, 6. Is there a 6A? I feel like there's a 6A, and then 7. And so those all go to the city. And so the computation is different because we have an intermunicipal agreement with the city of Schenectady that discusses if you're metered versus if you're just on a benefited EDU basis, right, for treatment costs. And so those treatment costs are always going to differ than the treatment costs of sewer two that are going to the wastewater treatment plant. So previously, if you're all paying the same treatment costs, how is that equitable, right? And so I think, oftentimes when, municipal officials like this board have to make decisions, the decisions are never going to be popular, right? It's like, okay, well, change is hard, we understand that. There's a distrust of the process, but if legally you can't include a sewer rent on a tax bill, how do you do that? You shouldn't do that, right? It's barred by law. And so, is the unit the same? No, because we're going to have affluent that goes to the wastewater treatment plant, and there's going to be affluent that goes to the city. So they cannot be the same in terms of the computation, right? Yeah.
I think my question is more directed to the debt service aspect of that, on units. And
Debt service cannot be shared amongst districts
I
that do
understand
not contain, that are not benefited by them. That would be also barred by law.
Totally understand. However, as I said, there is, and I heard it tonight, that's all I'm looking for is the calculation that comes up to the units that are in there for debt service, so there's documentation how they're arrived at. And
Well-
I'll take that up later.
Yeah, it would be
Go on.
whatever, bonding requires a supermajority, right? And so the bond exists, it's the underlying debt of the district, and then it depends on, is it a 5, 10, 20, or 40-year bond, and then it's spread over the number of units within the district, which should be validly created through the use of a map plan and report, and so that math should be easy to computate. And if you consolidate districts, I just want to be clear, because people keep sort of mentioning consolidation. When you consolidate districts, you may not consolidate debt service. That still rides with the underlying district, right? And so, if I live next to Joe, but Joe's in a different extension than me, then our debt service amounts that we receive in our sewer rent bill is going to be different. And that's important, I think, because people will have to pay their fair share, not more than their fair share.
Joe and I have had this conversation. That was my hesitation with the consolidation, but we'll move on from that. I had one other question in here. As I see well number 6, this would be a first in my career again, where I am seeing a lead agency designation, okay, for well number 6, the same night that I'm seeing you going out to bid, okay? I know you got it going out to March, but there's a reason that you're doing that, okay? When you haven't finished seeker yet, okay, you're generally not proceeding with bidding of a project. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Mastriani?
Okay, so we didn't have an agenda for this meeting posted online at any time and past 5:30, beginning of the meeting. I understand there's a lot going on. If you could elaborate as to what exactly it is, and if you could also speak to the challenges that are in place for not getting agendas out on time. And if you could comment also on New York State open transparency laws, and are they good or are they bad? Are they necessary? And are they appropriate set at 24 hours before a meeting? I'd like to know what the agenda is for the rest of this month. Don't want to get any surprises. Like the mall or the park.
I could speak to that, having gone through the process now. So in August, we created a procedure for preparation of the agendas in an effort to have them out at least 3 days before the meeting. There was some technical difficulties with getting that up and running. People needed training, things to that effect. And I would say before that, before the resolution that assigned the agenda to the clerk's office, it was done in the supervisor's office. And I think that was an issue, and I can't speak, I'm not there, so I don't know. I'm not the supervisor. But I think when it was with the supervisor's office, there was an effort to make sure that no business that the town needed to conduct was delayed because of an arbitrary cutoff date of, like a week before. But I'm not the supervisor, again, I can't speak to that. I only know the process since the resolution assigning the preparation of the agenda to the clerk, which was done in an effort to streamline the process and make sure that everything was available at an earlier date. But again, there were some technical difficulties. I would say the past tonight's meeting and last week's meeting are really my only experience dealing with agenda issues. Last week, we were notified at 3:30 that the clerk's office was going to be unable to complete the agenda. So Dana, who I think had to leave, stayed late and prepared the agenda when I asked her to, so that Ms. Marco could do whatever was necessary. And then this week, she notified us, Ms. Marco from the clerk's office notified us that she wasn't going to have time to do it. And I think that was on Friday, but I didn't see my emails on Friday, so I followed up and finally asked her if she needed help. I asked if Mr. Gittarelli could help her because he in the past has been able to assist and has spent hours, helping pull it together. And she indicated he was not going to be able to help her, so I asked her to forward me all the information and I would try to do what I could on my lunch breaks, and last night and today on my lunch break, and then I got called into meetings and, and then I forgot to I didn't hit send on the email to Dana, who was trying to help me, to let her know that it could get posted, and then I was rushing over here, so I apologize.
Okay.
It has not been, I have no training in writing resolutions. I'm not a municipal attorney. I can tell you that I could see who had done work at what points. I can say Ms. Marco started the agenda last week. I think she had 4 or 5 items listed on the agenda, but as you can see, it ended up being quite more than that. And I would say in relation to the next meeting that I asked to add, because I cut people off when they started sending me emails asking to have things added on for tonight, and I said, there's no way I can do that. Which I circulated a text asking if everyone could be available on the 29th because there was no way we were going to get some items on.
Okay.
So there's a couple things that we can talk about that I think Larry Lamora asked for something that by the time it came in, I couldn't do it. We're gonna move this resolution. I'm gonna make a motion in a couple minutes for the resolution to approve the proposed plan to dissolve the Plotter Kill Fire Protection District. Since Mr. Hannigan, Attorney Hannigan, didn't get us that resolution this afternoon, and we weren't able to locate it through the clerk, we're gonna table that to the next meeting so that can get done, because that district needs to be able to do what they need to do, right? We don't wanna hold them up, so. I can tell you that's what I know is gonna be on for the 29th so far, but there is some time for them, for other department heads to submit, end of the year stuff if they need to get it done, I guess. So, that's the process. You asked about, I think you meant the open meetings law. I'm a huge proponent of open meetings law. I think it provides the transparency that you're supposed to have. I appreciate that the language of the law says 24 hours or when practicable, I think is the language. And I apologize, I haven't read it since it was updated, but I think that's what it says. So I apologize again for not getting it out sooner. And I think we're all just doing the best we can in a COVID world with short staffs and all these other things.
So,
Thank God Dana came back from maternity leave when she did. There was literally nobody in the supervisor's office to do this for a long time, so
okay. So there's one more meeting scheduled for December now, for the 27th.
There will be once we vote on it,
be.
technically. There'll be a December 29th, but technically right this second there is not. But we anticipate by the end of tonight's meeting there will be.
Perhaps a second meeting or a third meeting in December, or
Oh
fourth
God, I hope
meeting
not. I
actually?
cannot schedule any more meetings.
Just one more. So how can we, get an agenda out in far enough advance and have an idea of, what's...
Believe me when I tell you that is the goal.
We've been trying to get it lined up, and we've tried various ways over the past, I would say, the past 2 years we've really kind of cracked down. Mr. Gittarelli has been a huge complainer about the agenda.
Nobody feels good about the agenda not being out. Believe me when I tell you, nobody feels good about that, and you know what, I gotta concur with Mr. Murdoch, it is quite embarrassing.
And I
but
will
it's
say-
not malicious, and it's not, it has nothing to do with anybody trying to bait and switch or hide anything. It's just
Yeah.
the circumstances at hand.
There's no effort to hide things. I know Mr. Murdoch sent an email asking about what was on the agenda, and I copy and pasted what I thought at that point was gonna be on the agenda. I don't know if that's accurate at this point, but he asked, I answered.
In light of the fact that the meeting of the 29th will come up shortly and is not anticipated, and it's meant to include things that we're not able to get on.
Things I couldn't get done today.
Can we set a target for when we can get that agenda out, when we anticipate getting it out?
Ms. Marco, that's the question for you.
I would like to say a few words to you, Joe, or to the agenda.
I mean, I don't,
First of all, I would
Marco.
like to say I'm extremely sorry that it's happened, but I'm only one person, and I have a person out on surgery and another person that was put in another department that was hired for my department. I am only one person, I cannot do it, so I'm telling you right now publicly.
Ms. Marco, I don't
cannot
think you should be
do-
commenting on people in your office who are out on medical leave.
Well, I mean, the residents
No,
asked.
But it's
Out.
more than one, it's more
Excuse
than a
me,
one-person job.
Excuse me, out. I am running
No,
the
it's been
office
done by
myself,
one person.
okay? It's extremely hard, I have an extremely busy office, I'm doing the best I can. I am not gonna stay here till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night like I did a year or 2 years ago for 12 weeks. It's not happening, okay? I'm
I
going
mean,
to
Les-
publicly say to you now, I cannot do the agenda for the 29th. I am still here by myself, I cannot do it. So they can decide on who's going to do it, because I cannot. So they can.
So
say
you're
the
going
time.
on record refusing to do the agenda.
I am
just want
not
to be clear.
refusing. I'm not.
You are refusing.
No, I'm saying I cannot. I am only one person. I cannot do three people's jobs. I can't do it.
I
I'm sorry.
mean, I'm doing three
And-
people's
and there's-
jobs
and there's
instead,
other-
but
there's
it-
other people
it's
that have
fine.
it in their title.
I will try to do it
This
again.
is
I'll try to do it
insane.
again. I mean, the resolution assigns it to the clerk's office.
Yeah, a resolution that I was asked if I would do what I used to do, and yes, I said yes, and what I used to do is they used to send it to me in Word and I could certify it. There was no backup to that resolution, there was nothing.
I
That's
don't
the
know.
way I feel.
I don't know how it used to be done. I wasn't here. I'm sorry.
to be better at it.
That's it.
I mean, you know what? There's one more meeting. We're gonna get it done. We're gonna get it done. We're gonna do the best we
And then
can.
we know it's gonna be on the 29th.
I know, but the Friday before I think is Christmas
No,
Eve.
this Friday, whatever is by this Friday, get it on the agenda,
Like I
get it
said,
out.
the highway superintendent sends you things the day of,
Well,
and
it's gotta go to next year.
I
That's
tend
the
to agree, but I'm the
Yeah,
one
I
who
tend to
often
agree as
screams
well.
at. Yeah.
But then you get yelled and screamed at, and then the fine line of
This is it.
what happens
Yeah.
when we push it off to next year and the public may suffer. That's the question I ask myself.
I know
Yeah, you're
we're
right, I like
suffering right
deadlines.
now.
You know what?
Correct.
This whole
We have
conversation's insanity. It's
Miss-
fundamental. It's an agenda.
Mr. Murdoch. I completely agree. So we're
It's
gonna do
not
our
on
best
you,
to get.
Samantha. It's not on you, Diana.
How-
I mean, it's on this town to just do
No,
it.
it is on Ms. Marco because that's where the
Give us a
resolution puts
Christmas
it.
present.
What?
Please, just get this agenda, like, have a deadline of next
You
Friday.
know,
Get the agenda out, whatever
the
has to be
deadline
done.
according to
have
the
all
procedure
department
is
heads
3
put it
days
out,
before the
And
meeting.
whatever can carry over to next year can go. I mean, this is insane.
That's not always possible, unfortunately.
Well,
Right,
maybe
so
if
Wednesday the
there's a
29th,
deadline, it's
so-
possible.
The problem though, Mr. Mayor, they're living, breathing documents, okay? They're not always absolute that they can be fixed on a particular day to have out for everyone. There were times, I remember when I first took the board, these things were out before COVID. We'd have them 3-4 days or the weekend before. I remember seeing them and looking at them early. You know,
I used to review them on the weekends.
yes.
I mean, what, if you can't get an agenda out,
We
what
don't-
are we supposed to think
I know.
about how these gigantic initiatives that you're throwing out here into the community that we're going to have to pay for, how much confidence can we have in that? It's insanity.
You know,
I mean, for this to come
Mr.
out
Mr.
at
Murdoch, I
6:30
tend
is
to
insanity.
agree. Mr. Murdoch, I agree. But when you asked what was going to be on, I let you know.
Is there other towns that this is happening? Is this
I
like
have no
everywhere?
idea.
Are we
No.
special?
I have no idea. I know every town prepares their agenda in a different way because I did ask around, and I think Mr. Guidarelli asked around as well. But you know, I think we need to continue with the meeting. We're going to do our best. There's a new administration coming in. I hope they have better luck getting their agendas out on time.
Me too.
You know,
And we welcome any suggestions.
Yeah.
Any suggestions? Have a deadline this Friday for any agenda items and then release the agenda.
I have no way to
I
set a
know.
deadline. I am not the clerk who's in charge of it, and I am not the supervisor. So I have no ability to go in and say, you're all cut off.
I was gonna ask if you guys had any insight into, it sounds like the way it's being done or way it was proposed to be done since August needs to change, it needs to involve.
I mean, I don't think
more people,
any
more
way has
expertise.
worked ideally.
Correct.
So whatever you guys figure out moving forward,
And
I'm
I
on
was
board
gonna-
for.
I was gonna ask if you guys had any suggestions as to how it could be done better.
My suggestion was the procedure that we circulated in August, and, you know, that hasn't worked out, obviously, since August, because here we are in December, and it's still not working, so, I can forward that to you
Started
guys.
working
Yeah,
worse.
please.
It actually got worse. It's amazing.
Yeah,
It got worse.
it is.
And who's, it's like, it's from a taxpayer standpoint, a citizen who's trying to engage.
I agree.
Who's trying to understand the level of frustration, irritation, annoyance is just through the roof.
I agree.
And so for Joe and for Steve, good luck, you know, thank God, man. As Steve said so eloquently, I thank God I'm not gonna have to come back to this. As you said at the public forum, you can't win.
I look
So I
forward
have
to the
some
new.
empathy for you guys, but there's great sadness in my heart.
I'm looking forward to the new
That we
administration
can't
finding a way to
this.
make it work.
The one thing.
Is there no ability, dumb question, is there no ability to, I don't want to tread too much into politics because I'm trying to be very apolitical in my role. I do think the idea of setting a deadline for items on the 29th agenda would be a good thing. One of you said, I think, said that you don't have the
I said I don't have the authority to do so because I am not the,
But-
I'm not the
but-
person who's supposed to be in charge of the agenda in any capacity.
Understand, but
So
is
I've
it-
just stepped into the role to make sure it gets done.
Understand, but is there a possibility of this board tonight voting, somebody making a motion to set a specific example for that specific meeting, specific deadline for that specific meeting?
I mean, who's gonna enforce it?
Well,
Well,
but that authority then would be coming from the town board,
They've
correct?
already done that, right?
We've already done
So
that.
they've
We have a
already done all the
procedure that
resolutions.
says
They've already
it's
set a
posted
policy
3 days in
procedure.
advance of the meeting,
It's not followed.
the final agenda. So
But you could set, I mean, you set
I
part of
can,
the
but
problem.
anyone can still add it back on, is what it comes down to.
But you said that part of the problem is that things get added at the last minute.
Yeah.
You could set that deadline right now that nothing
Yes.
is added on after
Yes, we absolutely can.
the 23rd of,
But if
or
somebody calls the
17th.
supervisor an hour before the meeting and says this has to be on because, you know,
There's a deadline for funding or something, you know, there's,
it's always a grant or something to that effect.
Right.
So, and then it
so we
goes,
could push that off and get out, we'd be out of line for grant funding, might even affect the
But you would
schools.
already potentially have an agenda, I understand, so.
Yeah.
You have a draft
I see-
agenda.
I see, I think as I understand the open meetings law right now, is that you have to do your best to have that agenda out a certain period of time before the meeting,
24 hours.
24 hours,
practicable,
right.
Yes.
So we do the same thing for school board.
Yeah.
We typically put out our agenda for a Monday meeting on a Friday.
Yes.
And invariably, there may be some minor changes that come up in
Right.
between Friday and Monday. Those can always be addressed
Yes.
as long as
And-
you're as timely as possible
Yeah.
with that. So why not set your expectations now, set your dates now for that,
I mean, what it,
with keeping the holiday in account?
I agree. We can set a date, but what it comes down to is on Thursday, there's simply nobody to prepare that to post on Friday. So,
So you make it on
so somebody's-
Wednesday, you make it on
yeah,
the Tuesday prior, you make it
Yeah, I
set
mean-
that deadline at that point in
The
time.
deadline for submission is 8 days prior to the meeting, and then I have 24 hours to review the agenda and resolution when it comes to me at 12 o'clock on Thursday. So I don't receive an agenda and resolutions at 12 o'clock on a Thursday for the following meeting on a Wednesday. So then maybe in the afternoon on Friday, I might get 3 or 4 resolutions, and then,
But you also don't normally have a holiday in a 2-day holiday in the,
so
in the
out of
midst
the
of that.
20,
I'm
out of
saying
the 20
balance
item
it back and
agenda, I
setting-
received 4 resolutions, and then,
Yeah.
Councilmember Miller Herrera kindly advised that she would make her best efforts to subsequently do that work.
I mean, we have one more meeting. We're gonna get through it. The new administration can come up with whatever policy and procedure you guys wanna come up with. I don't think you're gonna get any opposition from the rest of the board. We just,
Well, let Mr. Mastrani finish and then you
Yeah.
can come up for
Yeah,
privilege.
we can work on the policies
Yeah.
and make it, and
I can
make a
forward you the
commitment.
current one, and
Yeah,
you guys
please.
can work on it in the meantime.
And-
Yeah, give me your email address after, and
Yep.
I'll send it to you tomorrow. Is that okay?
Yep, that'd be great, and we can work on, and making sure that we're,
Yeah. I mean,
doing
Mr.
this
Guidarelli
far
and
in
I worked
advance.
on it, you know, to try to come up with a way to
but
streamline things.
the meeting proposed for the 29th is
Yeah.
not a scheduled meeting. It's basically an addition to this meeting, which is running late tonight. So there shouldn't be anything unanticipated for that meeting. We should be,
Yeah, again,
well,
Joe.
nothing that is so important that can't roll over into January.
I have no idea.
See, that's a loaded question. I mean,
Yeah.
look, they're not intentional. If I can say it, right?
Like here,
We don't-
there's
we
one
don't-
here tonight for granting for a grant application. If something comes through the works and you have to the end of the year to get in line for grant money, that could be a last minute thing. It's not a perfect science. Can we do better? Absolutely. Is this unacceptable? To your point, absolutely. But clearly, the system that was put in place in August is not working. Okay, as you said, seems to have gotten worse. So we look forward to something, like I said, Ms. Miller Herrera, Mr. Guidarelli can give you what was proposed, how it's not worked. You want to ask questions on where each one, and ask us individually where we think the breakdown is? That's fine. But like I said, we look forward to a better solution to this. You know, I'll own it. I got no problem, but we got to do better. Understood, 100%.
And you know, I appreciate, it's frustrating. I appreciate that. But it's not like we're getting together on our emails and saying, hey, how do we want to frustrate Vic Murdoch today? Or, you know, how can we get, you know, Joe Mastriani to come up and ask us these questions, okay? We have the best of intentions. You know, there are technical aspects to this. There are unforeseen aspects to this. Again, it's a living, breathing document. In a perfect world, we would not be having this conversation right now about
And this is a part-time government with all of us having day jobs.
But the point being is, you know, never in the almost 4 years I've been in here, because it's concluding very quickly, have you ever sat here and said, you know, how can we not be transparent? You know, like let's fool them. Let's play some games with the public, or let's not try to. If it's interpreted that, I think it's our first knee-jerk reaction to want to think conspiracy because somehow something is not being done. It's a technical issue. If the server were to go down for some reason, it's down for 3-4 days. You guys can't get the budget. What would you feel like if somebody was over there saying, "Ah, this is nothing but the board being transparent," and you're sitting up here saying, "Hey, it wasn't me. It was the server." And now the server's not going to be up for another week or so. We can't get the agendas out.
But then you get that information out. You say
I know,
what happened.
but we're giving the information. We're giving you the information as to what the issues are. But it's still being perceived as some sort of conspiracy and some non-transparency. So imagine if you have a reasoning behind it, whether it's frustrating or not. If you say, "Geez, you know, I can understand, Mr. Murdoch. Our servers are down. And you're very frustrated. I wish we could do better." And we're announcing it, and we have all these other things. How would it be perceived, or how would you feel now for the public to come in here, point your finger and say, "Oh, no. You're just, you know, you're not being transparent," and you want the public to understand this is not something we had any control of, or this was a technical issue, or this was a learning curve issue. Never once have we deliberately wanted to be non-transparent in our agendas, okay? It's been working, and it was a point in time when it did, and then things changed. We had COVID, and now we have a changing of responsibilities and learning curves. It's never been about trying to deceive the public. It's never been about that. It's an apology for the frustration of it, but not an apology for not being transparent.
Well, the
Okay?
transparency hasn't been there. The Viaport, this is a huge initiative,
Well-
the Viaport, and there's nothing online.
Well, let me just ask you this so
Zero.
much. I understand, because I got your message, or you made your floor request. Okay? But the concept of, we were at that senior meeting, and what were the questions that were asked, Joe? About the
park
Viaport.
in the mall.
Right, and
Two
the
out of
parking,
three.
right.
One
And how,
was in the park, one was on the mall.
when did we have that meeting with the seniors? Probably about, what, October or so?
Yep,
Okay,
early October.
all right. So it's there. This isn't something that we just cram down the
But the
public's throat.
numbers aren't there. It's the proposal. And why isn't something like this put up for a public, referendum? Why isn't $17 million for
Because it
a
doesn't have
sewer
to-
treatment plant put up for a public referendum?
It doesn't have to be.
Why wasn't the Hamburg Street Sewer District put up for a public
Because they're
referendum?
not required to be put up for referendum.
How about just doing it because it's the right thing to do? The people have to pay for these sewer lines.
Then the people
have
have
a
to-
say
and the people
with
have to-
whether they're going to have to pay for
And the
it.
people have to pay for the referendum.
That, it's a hell of a lot
All right, we're
less
getting
expensive than a
sidetracked here.
sewer line.
Gentlemen, I hate to cut anyone off, but
Anyway, just the last
it's a
one
late
question and
night.
I'm done. I don't-
It's-
All right, let Mr. Mastriani
Mr.
wrap up.
Mastriani has the floor,
and I'll-
Mr.
Yeah, you
Burke.
already are.
You know, they talk about grants, are we cognizant of any grant deadlines, and if there are any unexpected
I
grant
have
proposals?
no idea.
No idea.
You know, and so the meeting proposed for the 29th, is it possible we can, you know, not,
I have no
it's not
idea.
about setting an enforceable deadline, but, you know, getting it known to all town
Listen, the
department
enforceable
heads.
deadline's documented, whether we meet it or not,
No,
that's
but
the
I'm saying,
challenge.
getting Noman out.
Mr. Mastriani, when you come into office, you can try to do those things.
Well, I'm just suggesting,
lucky if I get any
because this meeting
information.
is, and we will for meetings in 2022, we will work this out, okay?
I don't think we're gonna have what you want for December 29th. We've been unsuccessful getting this lined up for how long? It's not gonna come together in the next couple of weeks.
Well,
I have neither the
seems
energy nor
possible.
the patience to force people to do their jobs in a timely manner right now.
Well, whoever's involved in the agenda process.
I mean, obviously, there's some discord about
Should
the
understand
agenda
that.
preparation process, and I don't want to make a public spectacle of the agenda process.
Right.
It is what it is. You guys are going to resolve it, I'm sure.
Yes.
Supervisor-elect Collins worked for the town. She understands the nuances, the personalities, all the things involved.
And-
I am sure she's going to have a much smoother
We will,
transition.
and we'll all be committed to that, and that'll be an issue for 2022. But my question is not about the agenda-making process specifically at this point. It's that the meeting on the 29th is basically an extension of this meeting, so nothing should be any further surprise. If
What I'm
if
telling
Larry
you
or
is-
any other department heads need to make, and submit anything that they want to be on, it should be reasonable to expect that they will get that in before Christmas Eve, the 23rd, respectively. Any other contractors or anybody involved in town business should get things through before Christmas. Is it possible we could have this agenda out
Anything
before
is
Christmas for
possible.
this particular
Mr.
meeting?
Mastriani, anything is possible, but I'm
Right.
not going to tell you it will be because I don't know.
I respectfully encourage the process as we move forward, that for this particular meeting, we can be all aware before Christmas what
That
we're
is our
gonna
goal.
expect.
We said that 80 times now. That is our goal.
Before
All right,
Christmas.
you're beyond your 4 minutes, so is there anything else you need to wrap up with?
Just ending this, Mr. Smith, you will find when you're up here, Mr. Mastriani, the difference between what you expect and what you actually receive.
Right.
It's good to set goals, though,
No,
before
no,
Christmas.
no, I understand. You watch
This
it.
lady in the back had her hand up.
Yep.
She's sore.
I just had a recommendation.
Do you want to come up so you can?
Oh, gosh. I don't want to be on.
But we're recorded and it's just easier.
Okay.
Ben does a great job, believe me.
State
And I
your
can't
name,
hear them
state your
wearing
name and
masks.
address for the record,
No, I
please.
kind of pumped myself last time. That was not. Sarah Delicious. I live at 1119 Sunrise Boulevard. I just have a recommendation for you.
Yeah.
The last meeting I was at, when I had asked about, the town hall and moving to the airport and stuff, Mr. Thomason went on a rant about how it's going to save us so much money because we have way too many town employees. I think he pretty much said we have 3 and 4 people doing the job that one person could do. So my recommendation is maybe we can take one of those extra people that the town pays and give them to Miss Marco so she can get her job done.
You already took it away from yourself.
Okay. Well, that was just a recommendation. Also, I do have a question. As far as the new park that all that money was just spent on, what's going to happen to all the other crappy parks we have around Rotterdam?
I'd like to think we
Any
made some
funds?
improvements over the last 4 years. According to the Parks Department, a lot of the goals that were set were met. And, again,
I will tell you that I've had a master plan for parks for some time, and trying to get anyone moving in the direction to get them done has been problematic. We looked at using some of the ARPA funds, and I expect we are still going to, depending on the new administration, for a inclusive ADA compliant park that has a sensory area available so that all children are able to play, as well as have an area to decompress and calm down when
That's what we
overstimulated.
need in here.
I could use one. I mean, my kid with the
Splash
fidget
pad.
spinner feels good right now. There was discussion about a splash pad, and I asked the director of finance to look at making sure that there was some money set aside for that if the next administration wants to pursue that. We've looked at space to set aside for a dedicated dog park that allows a space for larger dogs in smaller parks and agility items, because my theory has been that we have all these pocket parks that people do not use and are not being kept up properly, and that we need to, and some of that is we've had trouble ordering replacement items, there's been issues as long as I've been on the board, but if we were to dedicate them and make them niche parks is kind of what I've been calling them, then you're able to bring people from different parts of town to utilize those parks for a more focused purpose. And then you get people who are exploring other parts of town who may not generally go to them. We have many that are already dedicated to sports, and that is admirable, but there are families who are not engaged in those sports and would not otherwise go to those particular parks unless it's in their neighborhood. So we did start looking at pricing out the all-inclusive playground, cost of things. I think that was running into $300,000 for the all-inclusive playground, depending on whether or not we use the base that is suggested for those. I started reaching out to programs that are already, or the manufacturers who are already on state and municipal contracts. We looked at putting walking trails into some of them. We looked at putting the permanent outdoor workout equipment, so pull-up bars, etc., in some of the parks along the way on walking trails. Mr. Guidarelli's heard me say this over and over and over again. But again, there's been, our DPW is not staffed well enough for anyone to dedicate their time to telling me where exactly these things need to be placed within the park to make sure they're accessible. Is there appropriately sized sidewalks for somebody in a wheelchair to be able to access a ADA compliant playground? Because what's the point of having the playground if no one can get to it? Do we have enough parking spaces for them? Or is there a water line that ends in a place that can be run to this splash pad? With everything that goes on and having been consistently understaffed as long as I've been on the board, I haven't been able to get answers to those questions to move forward on anything with the parks that are in place. And part of Mr. Thomasone's rant, and I can't recall whether he ranted about this on that particular occasion, but I've heard it over and over, is that he believes that if you were to consolidate highway and DPW, people who staff those departments would be available to do all of those things, including go out and take care of parks. But the way it's laid out now, the highway guys are not going to go, paint the playground equipment because they're not tasked to do that as DPW people. So I think his general rant has been that consolidating those departments into a DPW that covers highway as well as parks and all the other things that come under the DPW umbrella would be a better way to utilize town staff, and that from there we could better serve the community. So, sorry about my rant. It seems like every time you're here you get one, but that has been what I've been trying to do, and
to actually move
yes, there's a.
These are the things that you're trying to do.
Sorry, sir?
You have no idea that these are the things.
That's because if I can't, I've been here for 6 years and I can't get any progress as it relates to these things. We looked at hiring a town engineer. We didn't get any applicants, so.
Because I think you'd find a lot of people in this community would volunteer time.
I 100% agree. I've met with people from some of the programs that utilize the parks. Mr. Guidarelli and I did a tour. It was the beginning of, late spring. We went through all the parks. We did an inventory. We looked at what needed to be done. What can we do in-house? What do we need to have sent out? And I know one of the things was we hired a carpenter, and I thought the intent was to go through and help make sure that the dugouts were stabilized, that the facilities at the parks were ready for the season. That person got sent to the senior center to put woodwork in or something. I don't know, but it was not what I thought we were hiring for. So again, these are the things, the hurdles we run into.
If I could interrupt. One of the things Mr. Guidarelli came up with, which I think is a good idea, and maybe the incoming board will take advantage of this. Again, of course, it's always a cost issue at any rate, was I would say maybe a quarterly letter or something mailed out.
Absolutely.
Which is, something, maybe title it, a letter from the board or something which gives you an update of all the progress that's been going on with the town. And that's one thing that, Mr. Guidarelli has been bantering around for, I want to say 4 years. Right?
And utilize social media, put it on the phone.
Yeah, that's possible. But the problem you have, of course, is, listen, whatever media you choose is great. You're always going to find someone that'll say, well, listen, I'm not tech savvy. So, and the problem is I don't know if we can go ahead and say, well, make a list of all the people who aren't tech savvy, mail it to them, and those that are, don't mail it to them. I don't know. That's to be decided later on. But I agree. Something that informs the public, maybe on a quarterly basis, that just says, hey, this is what we've been doing, this is where your tax dollars have been spent, this is what's going on here. I think it's a great idea.
Allows you guys to communicate and engage with the community.
Yeah, no,
We
listen,
could-
it's been,
it's no secret, we could improve our communication
yeah,
process.
but again, it's something that's gonna have to be aired out, because like anything else, how much will it cost to mail it?
Well, it can be-
All the best, again, all the best of intentions, but you're always gonna have some
And
logistics.
who's gonna
some
put it
cost.
together to send out?
Well, I don't know, I think Miss Miller wants, no, I'm not kidding.
I want my parks, I don't want to be doing administrative work anymore.
She doesn't want to send letters, she just wants to.
All right, and
But I think-
can we,
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's a great idea for the board, the incoming board to consider doing.
refocusing on the agenda.
Yeah.
Mr. Murdoch, you had one last question.
For the meeting for the 29th, will there be zone change on the agenda?
Not
No.
that I'm aware of.
No, Mr. Wright, I know that, I always
I can
got,
sleep for Christmas.
I got,
That's your Christmas present to me.
yeah, I must say, Mr. Murdoch, before you go, when you send those emails and they go around everybody else, you say, I want to know what's on the agenda, I know what he's thinking. He's like, is that change of zone on that agenda? That's, all right? You're
It's all covered. All the other language I use is covered.
Yeah, no, and I'm simply, believe me, you don't know how tempted I am to say, Mr. Murdoch, don't worry, we're not going to be voting on the change of zone.
I'll sleep well. Thank you.
All right, so if I don't see you between now and the holidays, please,
Very
have a
good.
safe and happy holiday.
And thank you for your passionate input. sir.
Yeah, very good. That's what I'm gonna miss, Mr.
I'll see you
Murdoch.
guys over here.
Very
Yeah, save me a seat.
You got it.
Very good, okay.
Should we move into
Any other
the
questions? All right,
resolution?
let's move into the resolutions. I'd like to start by giving the floor to Ms. Miller Herrera, who has to add a resolution. or
I'm going to make a motion
motion.
to table the resolution to approve the proposed plan of dissolution of the Platterkill Fire Protection District. And as explained earlier, we are tabling that to the 29th so that we can have the resolution that was suggested and then can be reviewed by our town attorney, but was suggested by the attorney who represents the Platterkill Fire District. So I make a motion to.
A motion has been made to table the resolution approving the proposed plan of dissolution of the Platico Fire District.
I second that.
Herrera, seconded by Mr. Signori. Okay, Ms. Marco, could you call the roll for the tabling of that motion?
To table, Mr. Christo?
Yes.
Mr. Gitterelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Signor?
Yes.
And Mr. Thomazone's absent, so 4 yes and 1 absent.
Okay, the resolution has been tabled. Okay, let's go back up to the top. Ms. Marco, could you read the first resolution, please?
A resolution appointing a cleaner/laborer.
And I have a motion.
I'll move.
Motion made by Ms. Miller Herrera. Anybody second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Gitterelli. Any comments on the motion? Ms. Marco, call the roll, please.
Mr. Christo?
Yes.
Mr. Gitterelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Signor?
Yes.
And Mr. Thomazone's absent. 4 yes, 1 absent.
Okay, next resolution.
A resolution amending resolution number 228 of 2021.
Yes, I believe there was one correction or change that had to be made on that resolution or an addition. And may I have a motion?
I'll move.
Moved by Ms. Miller Herrera. Second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Steve Signori. Any comments? Ms. Marco, call the roll, please.
Mr. Christo?
Yes.
Mr. Gitterelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Signor?
Yes.
And Mr. Thomazone's absent. 4 yes, 1 absent.
Okay, motion carries. Next motion.
A resolution appointing a coordinator of parks and senior programs.
May I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Gitterelli. And I have a second.
Second. Nice.
Second by Ms. Miller Herrera. Any comments? Ms. Marco, call the roll, please.
Mr. Christo?
Yes.
Mr. Gitterelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Signor?
Yes.
And Mr. Thomazone's absent. 4 yes, 1 absent.
Okay, next motion.
A resolution considering the adoption of a proposed local law of the year 2021 for the following purpose. Local law blank of 2021 to consider adopting a local law to override the tax levy limit established in General Municipal Law 3C.
Okay, this is to vote on whether or not we're going to blow the tax cap or not. Okay, may I have a motion for the vote?
I'll move.
Motion to vote on this topic made by Steve Signori. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Miller Herrera. Any comments?
The budget is now being presented, does not require that we go over the tax cap, so I am going to vote no on this.
Okay, any other comments?
Just to add that we heard that what we were able to put back into the budget as well from our preliminary.
Mr. Guidarelli, anything?
No, good.
Okay, I just want to again thank Ms. Greenwood for her diligent, many hours of hard work to, benefit this community. She's found us money from day one, and I think she does a hell of a job. And thank you again for your service to Rotterdam and for the service to your country. Okay, having said that, Ms. Markle, call the roll, please.
Mr. Christel?
No.
Mr. Guidarelli?
No.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
No.
Mr. Signor?
No.
4 no, 1 absent.
We are not-
It does not pass.
That's right, which
All
means
right.
we are not blowing the tax cap. Congratulations, all of you involved.
Yes, there you go.
Okay, next one.
A resolution adopting the annual budget of the town of Rotterdam for the fiscal year of 2022.
May I have a motion?
I'll move.
Moved by Ms. Miller Herrera, second.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Guidarelli. Any comments, if we haven't exhausted them already?
I'm good.
Yeah, we're all good. Ms. Markle, please call the roll.
Mr. Christel?
Yes.
Mr. Guidarelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Signor?
Yes.
And Mr. Thomazone's absent, 4 yes, 1 absent.
Alrighty, I'll entertain a motion for a consent agenda at this time.
Mr. Acting Supervisor, i.e. Deputy Supervisor, I move that we consolidate the items listed under, the resolutions listed under the title consent agenda into a consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion made by Mr. Canori, second by Ms. Miller Herrera. Ms. Markle, call the roll to accept it as a consent agenda.
Mr. Christel?
Yes.
Mr. Guidarelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Mr. Signor?
Yes.
And Mr. Thomazone's absent, 4 yes, and 1 absent.
Okay, motion carries. Very good. Now, I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I will move to ask the board to accept the consent agenda.
Okay, made by Mr. Steve Signor, seconded by? Second by Ms. Miller Herrera. Okay, any other comments? Ms. Markle, call the roll, please.
Mr. Christel?
Yes.
Mr. Guidarelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Signor?
Yes.
And Mr. Thomazone's absent, 4 yes, and 1 absent to accept.
Okay, that concludes the resolutions. Any committee reports tonight? I hear a little bit about parks, Mr. Guidarelli.
Speak briefly on the parks, and just back to the parks. So we have made some good repairs in the parks this year. The back-ordered equipment was installed, mulch was put in all the parks, and all the hazards were taken care of. And the parks are an ongoing thing. New issues arise all the time, so it's just something we need to stay on top of. I would like to say that hopefully I will be considered. I'd like to submit next year to be on the Parks Committee. We do have 1 or 2 openings. So I wanted to say that. And then I did want to touch base, and I don't want to have this a big, long, drawn-out conversation because I think we've already touched on this much. But as far as to the move to the mall and using some of the ARPA money, I mean, that money is for infrastructure, it's for improving operations, making us better, and just preparing us to move forward, and I really believe that money is going to do that. And that's pretty much all I have.
Okay, any other committee reports? Mr. Signori, do you have anything on
Oh,
miscellaneous, sir?
Mr. Christel, I do. As a
Very
matter
well,
of fact.
could you please enlighten us?
Yes. Remember, tomorrow, December 9th, 6 o'clock, Town Hall, the annual tree lighting ceremony. Right here, and there will be cookies, cocoa, and caroling. And we want to thank the Rotterdam Hannaford for their generous donation. And by the way, there will be a special appearance by Mr. and Mrs. Claus. Yes. Santa!
It's their busy season, too.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, does anyone have anything else they'd like to contribute this evening?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn made by Ms. Miller Herrera,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Guidarelli. All those in favor of adjourning for the evening signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That includes the 3 future board members also
Yes.
agreed to say to adjourn the meeting. Good, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming.
Since